Okay, so have you all seen Harry Potter, right? You know when the letter arrives and they get a good telling off and it's all shouting at them and rips himself up. The other day, I was checking my emails and one of my emails came out of the screen. A big tongue came out of it and it went, "Stop that coming, stop that." And it was actually Scott from Sengoku Studies. He says, "Anthony, if you're going to do the two courts period, you'll bloody well do it correctly or not at all." So I was like, sorry, Scott. And he's like, "And I'm coming on your channel to do it." So I did say, "Scott, did I get anything wrong?" And he says, "No, you've not got it wrong, but you've way oversimplified it." And he's going to give you a simplified version. It's not simplified. So basically, history of any form is really complex, but you can always reduce it. But this gets into what's something called reductionism, which you don't really want to go too far down the line of, but you want to get a little bit of, because this is YouTube. You're not all doing master's theses, so it's what we're trying to do is get across the basics so you understand why Kusunoki Masashige just comes out as, the brilliant man. So Scott is, just stay with me. Scott is going to do a video now. He's literally going to follow on from me and he's going to take you through the emperors. But just to prep you a bit, because it's not an easy topic, before Tokugawa Ieyasu, before Takeda Shingen and all that, a couple of 100 years before, there's another big war, if you like, and that is the War of the Two Courts. And then you get after that you get the Onin War, and there's lots of times that Japan is in turmoil. And what we have here are two lines. So let me explain this. The Emperor of Japan is not like the kings of England. You don't get a king of England and his eldest son is going to be the king of England till he dies, and their eldest son is going to be the king of England till he dies, until the regime falls and another powerful family come up. In fact, I would argue that the Emperor of Japan, and maybe Scott would not disagree with this, maybe Scott would disagree with this, I don't know, but I would argue that the Emperors of Japan are more like Pope kings. They are sort of elected religious officials, and I don't mean elected meaning they're not elected like that, but it's very different to the West. And what happens is that there are people who are descended from the gods, and these people are in line to the imperial throne of the emperor. And there's many people, because families have different different children and all that, and they don't have to pick the next one. They don't say you're the eldest, you're the one. They can actually pick who becomes next. And not only that, they don't do it till they die. What actually happens is they say, let's reign for 10 years, and they go through all the religious ceremonies and the complex things, and he says, right, you come off now and we'll pick someone else from this line. But this gets really complicated because the samurai get involved and start marrying off into the imperial family. And then if you're so many steps away from the imperial line, you're not an imperial samurai. And it all gets very complicated. And they're intermixing and mingling. But in all that chaos, there's sort of two lines that jump between each other. And at a point when Go-Daigo comes, it all gets messed up, and they argue over a court that's in the north and a court that's in the south. Not the north of Japan and the south of Japan. A court right in the sort of middle area. There's a court there and a court there, and they're vying for power. And these people, it's building up into this argument. And Scott's going to give you the simplified version that you're all going to follow very nicely. Of course, Scott has done this just for my channel, so very much a massive thank you to Scott, and I'm going to let you go in here, so stay with it. It's complex, but if you just remember in your head, this is about powerful families vying for control of all Japan. But then, of course, on the sideline, you get the shoguns who are also vying for power of Japan, and the different armies and everything. And in the middle of all that comes Kusunoki Masashige, like a shining knight out of the sun, to protect the emperor, who is just another one arguing for power, basically. So there you go. So without further ado, which I've took a long time to get to here, here's Scott.
Hello everyone, this is Scott from the Sengoku Studies channel. I would like to thank Anthony Cummins for having me on his channel again. In the comments of his video on Kusunoki Masashige, he mentioned me doing a short video about the two imperial courts in 14th century Japan. It can be a rather complex one, so I am going to be leaving out a lot of things. This is a topic I do plan to go into in more in depth on my own channel in the future. For now, this is just meant to try to quickly clarify the situation. The majority of this comes from a small part of one section of my master's capstone paper, but I have added some details that probably should have been in the paper originally and reworked it some. Any mistakes or flaws in this are my own. The situation begins with two sons of Emperor Go-Saga who reigned from 1242 until 1246. On the slides on screen, I will have the years they lived as well as their reign, but I will only say the years they reigned for the sake of brevity. These sons were the emperors Go-Fukakusa and Kameyama. Both were the sons of the emperor and the empress. They were both completely legitimate sons, thus making both of their lines legitimate. The conflict came because Go-Saga willed that it would be the line of Kameyama, the then sitting emperor, that would inherit after Kameyama's reign. The older brother, Go-Fukakusa, was a retired emperor, thus creating a conflict between two equally legitimate lines of potential imperial succession. The imperial court appealed to the Hojo in Kamakura for a decision. An attempted compromise was eventually put into effect in which the two lines would alternate sitting on the throne. The Jimyoin line descended from Go-Fukakusa and the Daikakuji line descended from Kameyama. As we will see though, this alternating did not actually happen often. So there was Go-Fukakusa, the first Jimyoin emperor, who reigned from 1246 until he abdicated in 1259, and almost all emperors on this list abdicated from the throne and then became a retired emperor. Following him, as previously stated, was the first Daikakuji line emperor, Kameyama, and his reign was 1259 to 1274. After Kameyama came Go-Uda, who was also from the Daikakuji line, and his reign lasted from 1274 until 1287. In 1287, the next emperor ascended the throne following Go-Uda, and he was of the Jimyoin line. He was named Fushimi, and his reign lasted until 1298. Another Jimyoin line emperor followed Fushimi, this time named Go-Fushimi, and he reigned from 1298 until 1301. After Go-Fushimi is when problems start to begin. The next emperor was a Daikakuji line emperor named Go-Nijo. His reign was 1301 to 1308. He also died in 1308. He died suddenly and his son was a child. This was where we begin to see another chain of events that would eventually lead to the creation of two separate imperial courts. The Jimyoin Emperor Hanazono followed Go-Nijo, and he reigned from 1308 until 1318, so this was not too much of an issue. However, due to the Daikakuji heir apparent being a child, the Daikakuji retired emperor Go-Uda had to name the crowned prince for his line. Thus, he named his second son, the future emperor Go-Daigo, as crowned prince for the Daikakuji line. Go-Daigo was not originally meant to be emperor, and he was seen as many as a placeholder until the proper line of the Daikakuji was put back into its proper place after him. But he did become emperor in 1318. It was during Go-Daigo's reign that the Hojo were overthrown and the Kamakura Bakufu fell. He is also the one who had conflicts with Ashikaga Takeuji between 1333 and 1336. This culminated in Go-Daigo fleeing Kyoto south into Yoshino in modern Nara Prefecture with the imperial regalia and setting up an imperial court there, while Takeuji placed a prince from the Jimyoin line, Emperor Kögon, on the throne in Kyoto. The end date for Go-Daigo's reign could be considered debatable because of this, but he remained the southern court emperor until his death in 1339 and did not abdicate. Kusunoki Masashige fought for Go-Daigo's side against the Hojo and eventually the Ashikaga. And so there were two imperial courts, the southern court of the Daikakuji line in Yoshino and the northern court of the Jimyoin line in Kyoto, giving the period from 1336 until 1392, when they were supposedly reunified, the name Nanbokucho Jidai, or the period of southern and northern courts. The first nearly 60 years of the Muromachi period fall under the sub-periodization. This was also a period of widespread warfare between the self-proclaimed supporters of the two courts. Localized warfare among provincial warriors remained common for nearly 6 decades. The impact this had on Japan was the topic of my master's degree capstone paper. This has been a really oversimplified, quick rundown of what happened to bring this situation about. As I said, I do plan to get into this in more depth on my channel when I get into the 14th century. I hope this has cleared some things up despite leaving out a lot. And I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you for taking your time to watch or listen. And thank you again, Anthony, for having me. I hope you all have a wonderful day or evening wherever you are. Take care.
Okay. I hope you kept with that, guys, and if you have, thank you for staying till the end. And what we have here is a clear understanding that Scott, knows what he's talking about when it comes to that. Well, in most of Japanese history, he's a wonderful researcher, Scott, and he should be in team membership with Stephen Nojiri. Both of them love the Northern and Southern Court period, yet they don't talk to each other. So I'm going to give a public thing here. Stephen Nojiri and Scott from Sengoku Studies should literally be in contact and getting videos of this done. And Scott, obviously, I don't know if Scott follows Stephen Nojiri's channel, but he should be on there. Right, apart from that, that is Scott's overview of how it all builds. I know it's difficult. Get it, just sort of get in your head there that there's this intermingling of families and lines and the movement of emperors. And the one thing you should take away from this is that imperial, or the emperors of Japan, don't or didn't used to always go with the death. They have retirement. They can retire. And not only that, you get multiple retired emperors alive who are still wielding power in the Japanese court, with new emperors who are in power but more of religious symbols, with other people who are vying to be the new emperor. So it's almost like a conveyor belt of power. Let's call it the conveyor belt of power. And then one dies and drops off, a new one's born. And it's not a single line. It's lots of escalators in a supermarket, in a mall in America, all going up, getting confused with different lines of who's going where, until you get to the crown at the top, where it's the emperor, and then you go off into like retirement and give more power and then die, and then it goes off again. So Scott's saying it is a simplified version, and what he did is, but it gets really complex. But you need to take with you just the lessons of the complexity of it, the different lines, the fact that the emperor doesn't stay till he dies, and not only that, the samurai are trying to get in and out of power around the emperor, and it's only people like Kusunoki Master Shige who are sort of protecting the emperor to keep it all going. And most of this story comes from the Taiheki, or that's the main story we go to, the Chronicle of the Great Peace. So if you stay till the end, do get yourself a copy of my book, which is the Book of Bushido, and enjoy that. And thanks again to Scott. Make sure you subscribe to Scott. I will pin his post at the top so that you can see who he is.